Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Ducksy Gaming and another video on the Reign of Heroes Champion League Starter. This time we're looking at how to level the build, how to gear the build up in early maps, and how to transition to early crit. There's then going to be a separate video that comes out going over how to craft all of the endgame gear. So the POB will be linked in the video description and the main build description. We're not going to go through it as I've done it in the main guide, but you just select the item set relevant to the part of the build that you're at, the skill set, and then the tree, and it will kind of tell you everything you need to know, and just progress the tree from part 1 all the way through. So in Act 1, I would recommend starting with a ranger. When you start with a champion, if you want to go bows from level 1, you don't get a bow, and the vendor is not guaranteed to sell one either. If he does sell one, it means you're then spending some of your valuable wisdom scrolls that you get early on a bow. Start a ranger, kill Hillock, get to town. You're going to take Galvanic Arrow as your reward from the vendor. And then you're going to slot that in your bow along with the Momentum Support gem that you've picked up. And then you're going to put that bow with those 2 gems slotted into your stash tab. We do not need any of the other gear that we've got. You can, if you want, put the flasks into your stash tab because you can sell flasks 3-to-1 to get an upgrade. However, you can't use a medium flask till level 4, so I don't normally bother, I just sell them. Once you've sold all of that stuff, check the vendor for 3 green links, green, green, red, and movement speed boots. You can do that by pasting in the regex I've provided in the video description. Just copy that text in, paste it into the vendor, and it will highlight any items that you can use. If you still have 3 wisdom scrolls, which you should have unless you had a ton of stuff for you to buy, go to Nessa and check for an iron ring. They're 3 scrolls of wisdom. The 1-to-4 flat damage actually does a lot early on. Once you've done all that, put anything that you want to keep into your stash, delete the character, and start your duel list. So then again, we just level through, we get to town, we take the bow out of our stash, we unequip the weapon, take the 2 gems out and sell that. We don't need the weapon or the gems. You will always pick up a weapon that has 1 blue, 1 green, and 1 red socket on it. You can put this in your weapon swap if you want for leveling gems. Go to the vendor, again, check for your links and your movement speed boots. We don't need to take a reward from him because we have the gems that we want. And then again, if you've still got 3 wisdom scrolls, which unless again you add loads of gear to buy, you will have, go and buy an iron ring from Nessa. If you've got 2 more wisdom scrolls, buy a rustic sash. You're now set up to do a lot of damage in the first few levels of the game. The first links you're looking for are going to be 3 green links for your main skill. It's going to be Galvanic Arrow, Mirage Archer, and Faster Attacks. You're going to want to run a Shrapnel Ballista with Pierce link to it. If you end up with the 3rd link, again, Faster Attacks is a good link. You're going to pick up Sniper's Mark at level 4. Use this on bosses. It's a big damage boost. You're going to need a movement skill. Again, Dash you get offered at level 4. Or if you have Intelligence, you can buy Frost Blink, which works really well as well. Either of those is fine. You're going to get access to Precision Gem at level 12. Only run this if you need it for accuracy, which you should not do in the first act. We are going to come back and pick this up once you go Precise Technique, but for now, you don't need to spend what could be a valuable transmute on that skill. The important things in Act 1 are getting a bow that is better than the rubbish one that you start with. Even just a longbow white is going to be twice the DPS to your starting bow. What you ideally want to do, by the time you hit Brutus or just after, is get a vendor crafted bow, or you get lucky, find an essence or an alchemy orb, and you use that on a bow base. Don't use it on anything below the longbow. So short bow, no. The crude bow that you get, no. Once you get to level 8 or 9 and you get better bases, that's when you want to start using them. If you don't find an alchemy or an essence, there is a crafting recipe you can use on a bow. It is 1 blacksmith's whetstone, a bow, and then a rustic sash that is either magic or rare. The higher the rarity, the more damage bow you're going to get back. Sell those items to the vendor. He gives you a bow back with increased percentage physical damage. Again, this makes a big difference for the first act. So whether you vendor crafted a bow or you used an essence or an alchemy orb, you should be fine progressing through to Merval. The only thing you might want to do is sell an iron ring and a blue gem, which you might have to buy from the vendor, and that will give you back a sapphire ring, which gives you cold resistance. It can help on Merval and stop you dying. Once you're through that, we're into Act 2. We want to progress out to the right, complete the cave quest, and take your 2nd Quicksilver Flask. So you've then got 2 Quicksilver Flasks to move quickly between zones. In terms of this act, you can pick up elemental damage at attacks when you kill Weaver. This is ideally what you want to slot in your 3-link. So we're going from green, green, green to green, green, red. If you don't have one yet, don't worry. We can just wait till we hit a 4-link. But if you do have green, green, red, it's going to be Rain of Arrows, Mirage Archer, LE damage with attacks. When you complete Chamber of Sins, you get offered a reward. I would take Herald of Ice. It's a tiny bit of damage, but it helps out. You can take Blood Rage, but I find it's not really useful till the second half of the game, and it's leveled up a bit because it just runs out too quickly. That's really all you need to concentrate on in Act 2. When you go through to Act 3, now is when you want to start checking vendors for 4-links because they're going to start being accessible. They'll also start dropping on the ground if you're lucky. We can use a variety of different colors. If a 4-link drops and you can fit 4 support gems or 3 support gems in your Rain of Arrows in, go for it. The ideal colors we're looking for are green, green, blue, red. And you're going to be looking for Rain of Arrows, Mirage Archer, Trinity, and LE damage with attacks. For your Ballista, we really only still need a 3-link because the 4th link is going to come from Inspiration in Act 6. And your 3-link is going to change because you're going to pick up Artillery Ballista when you kill Gravicius. Now, it doesn't get offered as a reward, so you have to buy it, and it costs a Chance Orb. If you don't have a Chance Orb, check if you've got a Fuse in, because you can buy 1 Chance Orb with 1 Orb of Fuse in. And your link is going to be 3-link. It's going to be Artillery Ballista, LE damage with attacks, and faster attacks. As I say, later on, in Act 6, that's when we add Inspiration in. You're going to get Anger in this act as well. Drop Herald of Ice and run Anger. You could also run Wrath. It really depends on what aura you want to run and what attributes you have. So this seems like a good time to talk about the 3 things that are going to carry your damage. First one is Point Blank, which gives you 30% more damage if you're close to enemies. So on bosses and tanky enemies, try and stay as close as you can. Precise Technique gives you 40% more attack damage if your accuracy is higher than your life. Because of the nodes you're going to take on the tree, it will be. You don't even have to worry about it. But if you want to check, you can just go into your character screen, go to the Offense tab, and look at what your main hand accuracy is for Rain of Arrows. And then the last thing is keeping Trinity up. So Trinity is a skill that procs when you have elemental damage that overlaps. So let's say you have a skill that has 1 to 100 lightning damage, and it has 40 to 50 cold damage. When it rolls 55 cold damage, it will fill out 2 of the bars because it's going to proc Fire Trinity and Lightning Trinity. Then when lightning hits over what that cold did, Lightning Trinity fills up and that completes your wheel. That gives you more damage and more pen. All you need to know is if this wheel is full, your Trinity is procced. If it isn't, it means one type of damage is doing too much. But Trinity, Point Blank, and then your Precise Technique are the 3 things that are going to carry your damage. So we're kind of nearly through the part where it actually matters, because normally from Act 4 onwards, you don't really need to do very much at all in terms of your character. The next big change is going to come when you do your first lab, and you're going to take First to Strike, Last to Fall. This now gives us access to Adrenaline if we drop below 50% life. So to make it so that we're always dropping below 50% life, you're going to go back to Act 2, and you're going to buy Corrupting Fever. You're going to go back to Act 1, and you're going to buy Life Tap. You're going to put these 2 gems linked together. Your Corrupting Fever needs to take more than half your life. It will say how much life it takes by just hovering over the skill. If you have 1,000 life and your Corrupting Fever is going to hit for 550, you're absolutely fine. Then all you do every 20 seconds is you hit Corrupting Fever and you get Adrenaline. Gives you a big damage boost, big speed boost, and some defenses. We don't need to do anything for the rest of Act 4 or Act 5. And when we get into Act 6, it's just a case of then aiming for your end game setup. So then what you're looking for is Rain of Arrows, but at some point you want to replace this with Vile Rain of Arrows. Check in the main guide, it explains how to get this gem. You're going to link that with Elemental Damage with Attacks, Mirage Archer, and Trinity. That's going to be your 4-link. Your 4-link for your ballistas is going to be Artillery Ballista, Inspiration, LE Damage with Attacks, and in Act 6, buy an added cold. That's going to be your 4th link. Start leveling that gem up. Your mark setup eventually wants to be Sniper's Mark, Mark on Hit, and Life Tap. I would recommend Flame Dash for movement skill. I think it's the best one. This, in Act 6, is when I start using Blood Rage because it starts to feel good. If you haven't picked one up and leveled one, just go back to Act 2 and buy Blood Rage. It will already be leveled for you. Then for your auras, this is really up to you. I would always run Anger because it's big damage. You can then either run a defensive aura of Determination or Grace, or go for more speed and damage and run Haste. Along with that, you want a precision that you can keep low level for now, but this is what you will level up when you notice your accuracy starts to come close to your life. And then you'll have your Corrupting Fever setup of Corrupting Fever, Life Tap, and Second Wind. They are your links all the way through to the end of the campaign, and they are your links all the way through to when you switch to crit. The only thing you will do is you will get a 5-link body armor when you're in early maps, and you just add a gem into it. So where we were Rain of Arrows, Ellie Damage, Mirage Archer, and Trinity, you're now adding Inspiration to those links. If you end up with a 5th link on your Artillery Ballista, you can add something in like Faster Attacks or Focus Ballista. And that's all you need to progress through until you switch to crit. So the next section we're going to go through is kind of how to gear and what gear you need early on. So, along with those key things to boost your damage, it all scales from your bow. So you do need to make sure you are paying attention to your bow when you are leveling. We are scaling elemental damage quite high, so it's no good having a white bow or a bow with just fizz damage because it's not going to scale the damage. Once you get past Act 2, you want to start looking for bows with elemental damage prefixes. It's either going to be flat cold damage, flat lightning damage, or flat fire damage. If you can get a combination of 2, even better. So any essences you get that are wrath, hatred, or anger, use them on bows if you need an upgrade. If you don't, save them and use them on bows. Don't use these essences on other gear. Alchemy orbs, orbs of bindings, if you need a bow upgrade, use these on bows. Keeping your bow at least at a decent level is massively important to leveling this build. Yes, you can get through with a very, very bad bow, but it's going to take you longer to kill enemies. The last thing in regards to a bow is use your crafting bench. As you level through sort of Acts 2, 3, and 4, you're going to pick up some flat damage crafts. So if we go to bows, there are these 3 here: fire, cold, and lightning. You'll firstly just pick up the bottom tier one, and then eventually you'll pick up the middle tier: fire damage, cold, and lightning. If you have an open prefix and you have a bow with Ellie damage, craft another damage type. It adds a huge amount of DPS. So if you're not someone who wants to rush the Atlas and you just want to take your time and progress, I'm going to go through the different stages of upgrading your gear. Once you leave the campaign, if you've got a bow that's got elemental damage on it, you're going to be able to do your white maps on the 4 link that you've left the campaign with. First things you want to target once you want to upgrade your build is just get more life and get your resistances on your normal gear. The things we're going to target for upgrades are bow, quiver, and amulet. With an amulet, you want an agate amulet and preferably with all attributes or big strength or big intelligence. Strength and intelligence is something you're probably going to struggle with, especially strength if you want to run determination. For your bow, you want to just upgrade to a better elemental damage. You can either just search the trade site for 450 plus LE DPS bows, or spec your first 4 points of your Atlas into essences, wait until you get a screaming essence of wrath or hatred, and just use that on a bow. If it then has an open prefix, craft some more elemental damage. For your quiver, again, just target essences on your first 4 points, and then you're going to use Woe to get bow damage, or you're going to use things like Torment to get flat elemental damage. As soon as you get a quiver that you're happy with that's maybe got 2 to 3 damage stats, that's fine. And then lastly, you're going to get yourself a 5-link body armor. I would recommend an armor and evasion base. Don't go for the high-end bases like General's Brigandine or Triumphant Lamella because they might be more expensive. If they're still only like 3 to 4C for a 5-link good base, then obviously buy one of those. Just make sure it's not a really, really terrible base that gives you like 50 armor and 50 evasion. And then I would recommend crafting this with fossils. Buy yourself a couple of single resonators and a couple of dense fossils. What these fossils do is they guarantee defensive stats on your item, but they make sure you don't roll life. What you're essentially looking for is a piece of armor with decent armor and evasion, some sort of resistances, and then you're going to take the mastery in the life tree that gives you 15% life if you don't have life on your body armor. This way, you get decent defensive stats and you can kind of make up for the fact it doesn't have life on it with this mastery. That setup will get you to your mid to end tier yellow maps. In terms of your auras, it's up to you what you run. For an overall better experience, I'd recommend running Determination and Anger. If you want to push and do a bit more damage, you could swap Determination out for something like Wrath or Haste. If you wanted to go super defensive, once you get your Perseverance belt later on, you could go Determination and Grace, because we will scale the damage from that armor and evasion with the unique belt. But I really don't think you need to in anywhere other than T14 maps, I think you should always be running a damage aura. And really, that gear should see you through to get through to your level 86, 87 that you want to then switch to crit. What this will allow you to do as well, if you've leveled fairly slowly and you've taken lead mechanics like maybe essences in expedition, is to go back to your white and yellow maps, farm your essences, farm your expedition, and get the currency that you need to craft the gear ready for your crit transition. And that's what we're going to want to do next. So whether you fast tracked and sped through your atlas, or whether you slowly progressed and upgraded your gear, you're going to meet at the same point where you need to switch to crit. And that's what we're going to go over next. When you're ready to switch to crit, open up the POB, set the skills to early map 5 link and the items to crit swap gear 5 link. The skills don't change from when you transition to crit unless you pick up a 6 link. Then you're going to add increased crit damage as your 6th link. In terms of the items, I'm just going to go through what you're looking for. There's going to be a separate video come out later about how to craft everything on the build. For your bow, you ideally want something with 550 LE DPS or more. If you can get 600 plus, even better. Along with that, you want it to have base crit chance of 7.75% or more. There's only really 2 bow archetypes you want to consider, and that is spine bow and ivory bow. They give us the best combination of base crit and attack speed. Do not use something like an imperial bow or a thicket bow because their base crit is 5%. So it's very, very difficult to scale that crit to the levels that we want to get. For your quiver, I'd recommend a broadhead arrow quiver base because it's attack speed, but primal arrow quiver with percentage elemental damage or the blazing quiver with flat fire damage is fine as well. In here, you're looking for some flat damage, crit multi, and damage of bows. That's really all you're looking for. If you can find something else like crafted attack speed or life, brilliant, but they're kind of the basics that we want. The other item we're going to change is our amulet. At this point, we need to get crit multi into the build. So you're going to look for a similar amulet that you've already got, which is just some attributes and if you can resistances. And then on top of that, we want some global critical strike multiplier. Apart from that, your gear doesn't change. You do not need to change any of the rest of your gear. What I would recommend you do is anoint high voltage on your amulet. So if we go to the tree and go to high voltage, it's cheap. It's an indigo, amber. These will be easy to farm yourself in Blight, or they will be, a chaos each. 100% increased crit chance against shocked enemies is massive. And lastly, you need to add in a diamond flask. You want the suffix on this to be increased crit chance during effect. So this is again 100% plus 45 is 145% crit chance. So again, it's a massive addition. So when you are mapping and you've got your flasks up and the enemy is blinded, you can see that our crit chance is 75% on basically not very good gear. The more you scale, the more you're going to get. Later on, we're going to add power charges in. So you can see if we were to just tick power charges, that puts it up to 88%. You then just need to find a bit of crit chance on maybe your quiver or your rings, and you're going to cap out at 100%. I'm just going to go through very quickly how to craft your bow when you transition to crit, because if you go on the trade site and just search for the requirements that we've mentioned, bows are super overpriced at League Start. It might be that you're paying 50 to 60 chaos for a bow that you can craft for 10 to 15. So if you want to switch to crit and you want a budget bow, you don't need anything other than a bow base that has item level 75 or higher. The reason being is that's when T2 elemental damage rolls. The only other thing we care about is crit, which you can get T1 at 73, and attack speed, you can get T1 at 37. So you've got your bow, what do you do? Well, we're going to go into a thing called Craft of Exile. I'm just going to go through the crafting process and how much it's going to cost. So all we're going to do is create a new item, and we're going to create just a bog standard bow. Like say it could be ivory or spine. So we'll go and set level 75, quality 20, and we'll proceed. What you're going to do is you're going to use essences. If you want to make it cheap, use shrieking essences. If you don't mind spending a bit more, use deafening. You're going to need on average 7 to 8 essences to complete the craft. I'd recommend wrath essences because it makes Trinity easy to balance. So we're just going to assume you're going to use shrieking because they're cheaper. All you need to do is basically get cold or fire damage on this bow along with either crit chance or an open suffix. What this tool does is basically tells you how many essences on average it takes. So all we're going to tell this to do is we want cold damage, minimum of T4, or we want fire damage, minimum of T4. Put one in there because that basically looks for one or the other. But then we also need this open suffix. So we'll go open suffix. or we're happy if it rolls crit, because then we can craft something else. So we'll say crit chance of tier 3 or higher, and again, count of 1. So all this simply says is, if I roll Essences of Wrath and I want fire or cold damage with an open suffix or crit, what's the likelihood of this? And this is a great tool to use if you want to look at crafting. It's also a very good way to check other builds where they say, I essence crafted this, but it might be they got super lucky and it takes 100 essences and they got it on their first essence. It's a very good way to check the overall odds of a craft hitting. And then all you do is press start simulation and it will roll that simulation. Number of actions is the number of essences it's using or the number of crafting attempts. Past is how many successful attempts with what we're asking it for. And a percentage of how often this craft comes about. And it's actually 13%, which is pretty decent. You don't have to, but I'll normally let this roll up to about 5,000 just for it to account for variance. So, I mean, I think we can stop it there because it looks like it's definitely a ratio of 1 in 8. So this will tell you how much it costs as well. So at the moment, these essences, it's saying if you bought 8, you could buy them for 10 chaos. At League Start, these are probably going to be 2 chaos each. They might even be cheaper with essence on the map device. But I'd think a maximum of 2 chaos for each of these. So let's say this costs 16 chaos. You then craft your crit, which is a few chaos. 20 chaos, you've got your bow. This on trade is likely to be 30, 40, 50 chaos. Then all you do is just go to items and then it will tell you all of the outcomes that happen. So what we'll do is we'll take one that is going to be the worst outcome. So this, for example, because it's rolled T4, which is the lowest that it can roll because it said look for T4 or higher. If we then just move that to the emulator, it puts it into a different window and we can then add our crit craft on there. So we'll go critical strike chance on the crafting bench. If you've got a exalted orb, I would recommend doing highest crit chance, strength and intelligence. Exalts early league are normally pretty cheap. They're like 5 to 6 chaos. It's worth the extra investment. So if we put that on there, we can see here that we've got a spine bow with just under 8% crit chance and 550 LE DPS. And this is the worst you can roll. You might hit T3 elemental, you might hit T2. This is your worst case scenario. This bow is ample enough to do the pinnacle bosses and then start farming your red maps, maybe altar farming, low level Alch and Go. You're not going to be at your juicing strategy stage yet, but you're at the stage where you can farm a ton of currency. That's all I wanted to go through with the bow because I know a lot of people last league, everyone looked for the same bow and a lot of people ended up overpaying and I don't want people to have to do that this league. By all means, if you don't want to craft, go and buy your bow, but it's so easy, I don't see why you wouldn't craft the bow yourself. That's really all you need to do to switch to crit. You do not need to worry about replacing all of your gear. You need to do your bow, you need to do your quiver, preferably an amulet, but if you can't afford it, just keep the one you've got and anoint high voltage, and then just add your crit flask. All I would say when you switch is go over the tree to make sure you've picked the nodes properly, because something like leaving precise technique in is going to be an absolute nightmare, or pathing the wrong way around the bow tree and taking the attack speed instead of crit is massively going to affect your damage. With this setup, you are more than capable of taking on the first 2 pinnacle bosses, and you're in a setup now where you can start farming your Atlas in red tier maps. So it's still probably not going to be at a stage where you're going to be able to juice and you're going to be able to do really difficult content, but it's at the stage now where you can farm the currency to get to the end game build, which is going to cost around 10 to 15 divines because the bow is going to be expensive, but it should be easy to farm up that sort of currency on this setup. This setup will not, unless you're brilliant, kill Uber Elder and Maven. It's just not going to have the damage. But once you have the build finished, it will absolutely do them with ease. When I invested the 10 to 12 divines when I did this build, Uber Elder, you are phasing him every single time within a few seconds. Maven, again, as long as you're okay with the memory game, is nice and easy to do deathless. As explained, there's going to be a crafting guide come out on how to craft everything. If you end up with a few divines of currency, you may as well craft a few endgame gear items. Apart from the bow, you can get your gear pretty much finished for a handful of divines, and then you just save up the 6 to 8 divines you need to get your endgame bow, and your build is finished. So the only thing I will say about the Uber Elder gear set that I've got set up in the POB is you do not need this level of DPS to kill Uber Elder. But because the fragments at League Start are quite expensive, bricking the fight is not really an option. So I massively overgear for it. I'm not very good at the fight, my reactions are terrible. I would rather spend a bit more on the gear than have to rebuy all of the fragments. Now, if you are naturally doing the setup yourself and you're just using the fragments you farm, it's going to take you a while to get Uber Elder and Maven even open anyway. So it's likely you can probably craft all this gear by then. The bow is the bit that I would not worry about if you just wanted to get those encounters done and you are quite happy with the mechanics of the fights. I'm okay with Maven, but Uber Elder I do once a league. I'm not particularly good at it. I always die once or twice. So the more DPS I have, the less likely I am to totally brick that fight. This gear setup is more designed for, this is all you really need to then go and do invitations and whatever mapping strategy you want to do. So don't feel like you have to get all of these items to go and take on Uber Elder. It's just what I'm probably going to do because I absolutely suck at those fights. The last thing to cover off quickly is when you're ready to grind for your endgame crit gear, make the 2 rings and the helmet the priority. The reason being, if we can reduce our mana cost really, really low, we can drop the ballistas and run a Manaforged arrow setup. The DPS is less, but we generate frenzy charges and power charges, which will boost up our main skill, and we don't have to worry about the time wasted putting ballistas down. What you need is a ring with -7 to non-challenge skills. You need 2 of those. And you need a helmet with the minus mana cost of attacks, which is done with the Exile currency. When that's done, it reduces your rain of arrows, if it's in a 6 link, to about 4 mana cost. It might be a bit lower if you get a better mana cost of attacks, but it'll be 3 to 4 mana. What that means is if we want to set up a Manaforged arrow setup, the skills are going to cost 2 to 0 mana. This is important because it means this is going to tick every time that we attack. So that's what you want to aim for before you then target the rest of the gear. I would wait until you've got the 2 pinnacle bosses down because we need all the DPS we've got for that. As soon as you have the pinnacle bosses down, feel free to drop the ballistas and go to this Manaforged setup. This setup is explained in its entirety in the main guide if you do need a bit more of steer on how this works. But that completely covers off what I wanted to cover through your leveling and your progression. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.